Welcome to A Life in Film. Our guest today is a man of many talents. From humble beginnings at the new criminal indie theatre group, he met John Cusack. The two went on to write classics Grosse Point Blank and High Fidelity. He's also produced projects such as Entourage and the Tom Cruise actioner Night and Day. As a director, he's gone from strength to strength with Netflix series Santa Clarita Diet starring Drew Barrymore and Timmy Olyphant, and the hugely successful Kobra Kai, but you may know him best with the comedy classics Accepted, starring Justin Long and Jonah Hill, and The Hot Tub Time Machine, starring John Cusack. Our guest today is director Steve Pink. So Steve, let's talk about your new film, The Wheel. How did this come to your door?
Yeah, so I shoot a lot of commercials, and this young producer named Josh Jason and his partner Molly Galula brought the script to me. Josh and I work in the commercial company together, and we had a particularly difficult shoot. And in that difficult shoot, because I'm not a very hierarchical person, I was like, okay, PA, you need to did you go to film school? Because this is a difficult shoot. You have to stop being a PA and start being a filmmaker with me if we're going to get through this. Because they kind of left, it's just one of those circumstances where the only people actually handling this particular commercial was me and him. Like the crew got really small. It was during COVID. And so, we got to kind of work together in a collaborative way just on that little commercial. And then we got to talking, and then a few weeks later, he brought me the script. And of course, the joke always is that, I was like, did you happen to look my IMDb up before you, sent me this material? Because it's just not something people think of me as doing. And, but I love the script, and I love the opportunity. For me, it was a challenge and an opportunity, obviously, to do a drama. No one is handing me, none of the studios are handing me a drama. If I wanted to kind of explore that, making a film in that genre and seeing what that was like. This was going to be my opportunity to do it. It was during COVID, and it was going to be a tiny little micro indie. So all of that kind of added up, and the script was kind of brilliant, and that all added up to me really wanting to do it. And then Josh and Molly put the way less than the crafty budget for Avengers was the film. I would say half the crafty budget just for the day. Like half a day's crafty budget is what we made for Avengers, what we made the film for. And then, the cast came along, when Amber Midthunder, when I met her, we just met on a Zoom, and I found her to be, obviously the perfect actor for the role, but also just an extraordinary person, and willing to take on the challenge that the role presented. And so then, along with Taylor Gray, and then we actually had to get Nelson and Bethany Ann Lynn. We actually cast them as well to kind of come and join us for nothing during COVID to do this little movie up in the Angeles forest in 18 days. And so we kind of put together this little family, and then went up and made the film. I had no expectations about what it would be, just because to try and execute the script under those circumstances was just going to be a challenge on a good day. And so I kind of had a, philosophical point of view about it. I was like, well, let's just see as a bunch of creative artists what we can create, and then maybe it'll be something, and that's how it all started, and that's how it happened.
Wow, 18 days. That is insane. I mean, for the audience as well, films usually take 3, 4, 5, like 10 times as long as that. And how was that sounds like it was a pretty hectic budget. Was it long days, 6 days a week, or?
Well, no, I'm not sure whether I think we shot 5 and then 6 days. I think they alternated. I don't actually remember, but because we were such a small crew, Jasper was our key grip, or was our gaffer, and this guy Tom Hernquist was our key grip. Like those two guys were the whole departments. This young woman, Brianna and Jemmy, was the entire production design department. We had we had I think 1 or 2 lights, but the rest were practical, and we shot with available light. So when you're that small, you can only shoot what you can shoot in a day, and so we were always just we were up at the summer camp, which had been closed because of COVID, and we would all kind of emerge from our cabins and kind of sort out how and what we were going to shoot that day. And then we would kind of, kind of walk over as a little troop to the place we were going to shoot. And we would just kind of start to shoot with the actors. And so, the days were extremely difficult, but I wouldn't say necessarily long, because you could only do what you could do in a single day, right? So we would, because sometimes there'd be thunderstorms, believe it or not, I didn't know there were thunderstorms in the Angeles forest during summer in the Los Angeles area. I had no idea, because it doesn't rain down in the flats. So, these lightning storms that took place in the mountains would just shut us down for 3 or 4 hours, sometimes a day. So, and then there were forest fires as well, which, almost shut down another entire day. And so, it was kind of an unconventional schedule where we just would kind of emerge and then shoot and then go back home, go back to our little cabins and then emerge and shoot. And that was the process. So they all felt really, really long, but they also were really super contained.
Wow, that is, yeah, it sounds like you were against the elements, and also during COVID as well. So like all of that to compete with. Were you doing daily testing and all those sort of things, wearing masks? And
when we first went up to the cabins, we all actually went into our cabins for 5 days. Like, we didn't see each other for 5 days. We walked around like ghosts in this little summer camp, waving from afar, because we all had to quarantine, as in the first 6 months of COVID. So we quarantined, and then we had a medical nurse up there, and we tested every single day. So I never saw anyone without a mask on, unless, well, first of all, there are many of the 20 people, I guess, well, we saw many of them at the Toronto Film Festival. So I actually got to see their faces, and I guess I would see their faces occasionally, but for the most part, I didn't see anyone's faces the whole time, except for the actors. And that was only when we were shooting. Made rehearsal tough at first, because we were literally rehearsing in chairs in a parking lot, in a giant circle that was probably 50 feet in diameter. And so I actually had a bit of a panic attack, because we would read through scenes and I would be like, oh, I don't think this movie's going to work. There's like no emotionality. There's no connection between anyone. And then it was like a disconnect as I was walking back to my cabin, and it suddenly dawned on me. It's like, well, they were sitting in chairs 30 feet apart with masks on. So it's going to be okay. Like, we will be able to create an emotional, like a convincing emotional reality and dynamic between these characters, when they can actually have proximity to each other and not be wearing masks. But so it was pretty surreal, and very cool.
You touched on it briefly before. This is a very different film for you. It's a drama. And how was that transition, sort of going and doing something that was going to be obviously very stripped back, lower budget, and a drama, and I guess few characters as well? There's not a huge cast in this. Was it quite nice to go back to basics and kind of have something that was quite simple, and I guess you haven't got the producers breathing down your neck when you're doing this one?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a totally different thing, than making a studio movie, for sure. Bella Gonzalez, who's this amazing young DP, she and I talked a lot about how to create the tone of the film, how we wanted to tell the story with camera, and it was very, very different than when you're shooting a comedy. And so we just kind of ginned up different kind of theories about how to capture the emotional perspective of every character in any given in every situation. And that was very, very different than obviously shooting a comedy, where you're, like comedy, so much of comedy is about rhythm, for me anyway. So like creating a rhythm on the day that, where the characters are, being absurd or funny and heightened circumstances. And then you kind of try and create a rhythm. And then out of that rhythm becomes the absurdity. And then that, generally, if you're lucky, evokes laughter. And so then when you're cutting the film, it's the same thing. You're trying to generate that momentum, which then, breaks laughter into this, into the room. So, with this, I was trying to capture a lot of the interior lives of people, and trying to capture as much what they weren't saying as what they were. And it was a challenge for me. Sometimes like for instance, I shot a whole scene. There's a little scene where they stop off at this little, store to buy some things. And, the actor, Taylor comes out, Walker comes out and he sees, Amber, or her character's name is Albie, on the phone, and he doesn't know who she's talking to. And there's a lot of tension, and he's brought her a couple of things. He's bought her some things. And then they sit in the car and he wants to bring it up. Like, who are you talking to? And there's that, kind of tension and awkwardness around, who she was talking to on the phone. It is making him, obviously really self-conscious. And I shot the scene pretty much like you would shoot a scene. I blocked it. I shot coverage, of both of them. I shot it wide. I shot some tight shots. I shot, the master. And then I realized after about 45 minutes, because we were working quickly, that I'd shot the scene entirely wrong. Like, I was like, this is like, there's nothing about this scene that I've just shot correctly. After shooting, because habitually I was like, oh, well, this is how you capture a scene and you get the coverage. And I realized I had missed the scene entirely. And I realized in that moment that the only thing that's important is checking in with Amber's character, Albie, in that moment, and feeling that, that turmoil that she's experiencing as they drive up into the forest, because she's essentially agreed reluctantly to try and work out their marriage, try to solve the problems of their marriage by going up for a weekend and seeing if they can, resolve their differences and remain married. And so I just was like, no, I think the whole scene's really actually checking in with Albie to just see how she's managing this moment. And so then I did the shot that's in the movie currently, where I just stay on her. And then you just kind of hear, all the questions and all of Taylor or Walker's insecurities happening kind of in the background off camera. And it's really just about her. And that was, I think, maybe our second day of shooting or third. And that's when I realized that I really only need to shoot the emotional perspective of the characters in any given moment. And I never really ever had to cover the scene in a traditional way. And so that was very new for me, having been trained to cover scenes traditionally, especially in comedy. You need the coverage because you need, in editorial, you need the cuts, because it's the angle changes and cuts that make it fun, that give you the opportunity to make things funny.
Yeah, that scene, that shot of her in the car really stood out to me, and I like the fact that was pre-planned. It wasn't like you shot everything and then that's what came to you in the edit. You actually had, once you did it, you were like, that's exactly what it's going to be. You're kind of editing it in your head as you go along. Yeah,
I had to say to the producers, these, and they're great, but I did have to say to them, who are counting on me, as a director with a lot of experience, to put these scenes away quickly. I had to go to them and say, hey, Josh, Molly, I know we only have about 20 more minutes before we have to leave this set, but I shot this scene entirely wrong. I need to get with Bella and we need to talk about how I think what the story I'm telling is, because I just shot it wrong. And then I went and talked with Bella and then with, of course, the producers and because I realized that there was a moment I wanted to capture. It was pretty easy to capture that, but it did make me feel like, your director isn't, is not as infallible as you might have thought going into this thing. So anyway, and so then, so that became the guide for how I approached the rest of the movie.
I have to say, I don't know what it says about me and my relationship, but there was a lot of moments in this film that felt very real. Like the kind of the petty arguments, the kind of nitpicking at each other. The first sequence, I was watching it with my girlfriend, and we were laughing at what they were arguing about, and I was like, straight away, that kind of puts across this is well written, and this is something that if it speaks to you. That dialogue, I mean, obviously you're a writer, you're a director as well, you produce as well, but with the dialogue and with the way this was written, did you, obviously because you've written a lot of things in the past as well, did you ever want to get kind of stuck into the writing side of this, or was it already fully formed?
Yeah, well, Trent, the writer, and I were really collaborative throughout, and he, I had thoughts, and he would execute them, and then there were some things that I just did on the day, and he was really open to allowing his work to be whatever revised by me at various points. There were and there were certain things that I did that weren't scripted, that I just felt in the moment. Like there's a moment where they're going up the hill and they pulled over to the side of the road because the car is having radiator problems or whatever. And it occurred to me to show the audience or give the audience an indication that there was love underneath all of this strife. And you see him like do a steering contest with her. And I was like, and I just said to Taylor, I was like, try and get her to smile. Like, just don't, because I didn't say anything to Amber. I was like, open the hood, and, the action is opening the hood and pouring in the radiator fluid or whatever. And I was like, just don't do that. Just stop and see if you can get her attention. And then by getting her attention, just see if you can, get into a steering contest with her, make her laugh. And they're such good actors, Amber and Taylor are so available for being in the moment. That they're always playing in the moment. They're always just experiencing what they're experiencing as characters in real time, as great actors do. And it just became its own moment. So that was an example of like a little kind of a bit of warmth that was just kind of created spontaneously. The lake scene was another scene that I contributed to, just because it occurred to me that we did need to show that again, there was love between these characters, like, because it's very hard, as you know, watching the movie, to stick with it a little bit. I mean, it's I don't know if it's hard to stick with it, but it's we're challenging the audience to care about these two people who are in such distress, that I was like, it did occur to me. I was like, well, don't we have to answer the question, why were these people ever together ever? Like, we can understand why they maybe stay too long in the relationship. We can understand how conflict builds inside a relationship and that becomes untenable. But you also have to, I think, give a sense to the audience that there was a moment sometime in the past, maybe when they met, where there was really love between them, and a knowingness of each other. If that's, and I don't know if that's a kind of strange way to put it, but a kind of deep knowledge of each other and who they are to each other. And I thought the lake scene kind of started to get at that a little bit, where you just saw that they did have a dynamic and there was a deep love between them, even if it was being buried currently in this, tsunami of anguish. So in that way, I was always, things would emerge and evolve, and I would talk to the writer. I would often call him, and, he wasn't on set, sadly. He was shooting something else at the time. And so I would call him and say, hey, I have this idea. What do you think? How does this track? How does this arc for the characters? And in what way, can I execute that? And he was always really great about, working that stuff out with me. Sometimes, oftentimes at midnight after a day's shoot.
And without giving away the end, obviously, I really enjoyed the way it ended. Was that always the intention? Because it does feel like, without giving it away, it does feel like it could go either way with that one.
Yeah, that was the intention. We took a big swing there. I oftentimes wanted to chicken out and just be like, oh, if we could just have a cutting point, maybe that would be a good idea. But yeah, we might as well try to pull it off. And it was as much, because from our point of view, it's a kind of visually, you're taking a risk in the concept, but you're not really taking a risk with camera, because for the obvious reasons. But so really it's on the actors, and their comfort level. And, so we pitched them this idea, and they were both really, really, Amber and Taylor were both really excited about the prospect of being able to maintain the engine of the scene entirely on their own, with their own, of their own power, because it's not being, they have no help from the magic of movie making. And so for them to do that was very brave, and I thought they did an extraordinary job.
And obviously the weird is where you're at right now. If I may, I would like to go back and ask you, obviously your CV is you bit of acting, writing, directing, producing. There's it's full of all kinds of things. What came first, and how did it all come about?
Well, for the record, I'm a terrible actor. So I know there are acting credits like deep in the past, but they are deep in the past precisely because I recognized very early that I was not a good actor. I was, also fortunately surrounded by really, really good actors. Like part of the way I discovered I wasn't very good was by looking across the stage at the person I was acting with and realized that they were brilliant. So I had to stop acting pretty quickly and then find out something else to do, and part of that was, well, at least I can recognize what good acting looks like. So maybe I can direct. We had a theater company and we're all very young doing the theater company. And so I was like, well, if I'm not going to be an actor in the theater company, I'm going to have to find something else to do. And so I tried my hand at writing and directing, and I felt much more comfortable because, because I'm both super interested in trying to figure out how to tell a story, and also super interested in not ever having to try and perform it, because that just seems too hard for me. And so, yeah, I mean, I've had a pretty eclectic career. I think it's hard, at least, to have an eclectic career. It's important to, like I was branded, it's a terrible term, but I was branded, or my brand it is and has been comedy for the kind of breadth of my career. And, so to do something different was really exciting. I'm happy that, it's been embraced somewhat. I mean, I think a lot of the reviews have said, and I'm really grateful for the reviews we've gotten. A lot of them have said like, oh, who knew that this questionably talented comedy director could actually engage with material with some nuance and sophistication. And I'm like, I'll take it, I'll take it for sure. So yeah, I'm mainly a writer and director, and I've produced things that I've been a part of coming up with, but I'm not a producer in the traditional sense.
Do you see yourself as well going back to doing more comedy? Have you really enjoyed doing this sort of drama side of things? Do you think you'll do more of that as well?
I mean, I would love to do as much as anyone will let me do, frankly. I do have some comedies that we are planning to shoot next year. One comedy in particular, which is more of a, like the broad stuff that I've done, I've really enjoyed. The comedy I'm supposed to do in the spring is more the kind of comedy that I love, in the kind of Jim Brooks tradition, where it's call it a dramedy, or, it's very, very funny, but it's very character driven, as opposed to massive, insanity and hijinks driven like Hot Tub. So it's more, I would say, not exactly like High Fidelity, or like Grosse Pointe Blank has a lot of set pieces, but I would say it's more like High Fidelity, the thing I'm doing in the spring, than it is like Hot Tub. So I definitely feel, I so enjoy set pieces. I really do. I really enjoy set pieces. I really enjoy broad comedy. I really enjoy executing like mayhem. Like it just pleases me. It's just one of the things I guess whether I like it or not, I'm inspired by it, but I'm mostly concerned with, having, interesting characters, to tell a story through. Because if you don't have that, then you have nothing, including the hijinks, which I've also learned in some of the movies that haven't been as successful. You just have the hijinks without a good story or character. It's, of course, worthless for the most part.
I have to say, I'm a huge fan of Hot Tub Time Machine. It is one of those films that just, if you ever feel like you need a good laugh, it's a great one for just popping on. And also at the time, I remember thinking it was really good. And I'm sure he has done films like this before, but seeing John Cusack in that kind of comedy felt like a really nice surprise at the time. And it's just one of those films that, and bringing people like Chevy Chase and these sort of icons of comedy in. With a project like that, it must have been a pretty big budget thing, but did you kind of expect it to be such a hit?
I mean, I guess I did not expect it to be a hit, but I never really expect anything to, I try and remain, open to things being both successful and, I'm always open to things being successful, and just pray to God they don't, fail. So I can't say I was surprised, but I would say I was delighted when it did find some success. And, going back to Johnny for a second, he's always actually been really great at having a bemused / darkly humorous view of the world. Like that's kind of his stock and trade. And so in Hot Tub, it was just everything around him was even more bananas, but which made his kind of, kind of, whatever sardonic view of everything that more, all the more hilarious, like there's this one moment in the movie, which I just love where Rob Corddry's like, where does it say in the asshole handbook that you can fuck over your friends whenever you want? And then Johnny, he improvised this. Johnny was like, actually, that's what it would say. If like there was an actual asshole handbook, like the first thing it would say would be, fuck over your friends. And then they all started agreeing about the fact that Johnny logically is correct. If there was an asshole handbook, it would say fuck over your friends. And so that was just such a vintage moment where he is just like experiencing like his world, he's expressing his worldview, which he's always been so great at. And that's what I think made the movie work, frankly.
Was there a lot of improvisation on that film, or was it kind of, did you have room to play with it? It sounds like with that situation, yes.
Yeah, I think it was probably 50%. Like, when you say it's improvised, it's not like you're improvising everything out of thin air. It's like 50% of it was explored and heightened in the moment in terms of like the comedy and the dynamic and the stuff going on between the characters. But all the actors, like there's this maybe a misconception on improv that it's like it's improvised in a way that again, like creates the what it is where there was nothing before. And that's just not the case. Like all the reason the great improvisers make it work so well is because they know what the scene is. And not only do they know what the scene is, they tend to know where in the story their characters are. They tend to know what relationships they have. Like Rob Corddry was always super mean to Clark Duke. So when you're improvising, he would always improvise super mean things, right? And Johnny was protective of Clark, right? So then he would improvise things that like push back on Rob. So, and Craig Robinson is just, the great observer of the world, like he, the hot tub where he looks at camera and says it must be some kind of hot tub time machine. That actually came out of us sitting around and talking about Trading Places. Craig and I were talking about Trading Places and how it's not a movie that breaks the fourth wall, right? It's not, like most movies. And there's that moment where Eddie Murphy, after he's being patronized by these, white racist Wall Street billionaires, he turns to the camera and to let the audience know, like, how dumb do these people think I am? And he just doesn't take to the camera. And so we're like, well, why don't we do that, right? Why don't we, it's already, ridiculously self-aware. It's called Hot Tub Time Machine. Why don't we just let the audience know in a very small moment that we are aware that they should be, and they should be aware that we are aware that this is all completely ridiculous. And so, of course, Craig Robinson caught the case because, he was the one who had that just, kind of brilliant deadpan and perspective on it in that moment. So that's why we actually shot it. It was a conversation that came out of Craig and I just talking about, movies we loved and moments in movies we loved.
Yeah, that's the trailer moment right there as well. I can just remember it so clearly the first time I saw it, him turning to camera and saying it. So it's a moment you really remember. And I'd never made the sort of link that there is a moment in Trading Places, isn't there? That's as you say, not what the film's about at all, but there is that little nod, that little tiny little moment, which makes the audience smile, I think. But this, obviously this is a very small blip in your career, but I have to ask about it because it's hugely successful. When it comes to, you did a couple of episodes of Kobra Kai, which I'm a huge fan of as well. I'm a big fan of a lot of your work, it turns out. With that show, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you did a couple of episodes in the first season when it was a YouTube show. Seeing it grow and become what it's become now, that must be, everyone, I love the Karate Kid and everything else. Did you have any inkling, when you were going and doing those episodes, of what it would become? It's brilliantly written and it's so well realized, and it kind of, it doesn't have the right to be as good as it is. It really is the best it could have ever been. When you first read the script and you were going to go and do those eps, did you have an inkling that it would become what it became?
Well, I mean, Josh and Hayden, Josh Heald wrote Hot Tub Time Machine, right? So Josh Heald is one of the creators of Kobra
Oh,
Kai.
right.
Right. So when we were shooting Hot Tub, you may remember that Billy Zabka is like the guy that Rob and Craig meet in the bar, and they have that crazy awful bet, right? That kind of big.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So John and Hayden and Josh were already working on this idea of this inverse reality, or this parallel story of telling the story from the Kobra Kai perspective and from Billy Zabka's character's perspective, Johnny Lawrence.
Yeah.
And so they've been working on it for years and years and years. And so
wow.
I'm not sure. I don't think, I'm sure they would tell you that they didn't expect to have the massive success they had, but they were onto something. Like, they understood for sure, like, what story they were telling, and they, their kind of broader perspective on that world through Joey Lawrence's eyes was just brilliant, and to put that together and get it all to happen was, just such a great, I'm so happy that they did that. They worked on it for years, and it was a huge thing for them to pull off. And so then, when they were doing the first season, Josh asked me to come in and direct, a few of them. And of course, I was so happy to do it, and we had so much fun. I mean, the first season, especially because when no one really knew what it was going to be, you're shooting the first season. You don't know what's going to become in terms of audience reaction, but we knew what it was when we were shooting, and it was just so fun every second, because they had kind of cut into this brilliant vein of storytelling, and so the perspective was always fantastic, and the actors were great. Everyone kind of knew what it was, and so it made calling action pretty much a joy every time I did it.
It's just so well done, and it is one of those things that I didn't have particularly high hopes for it when I started watching it, and the minute, like 10 minutes in, I was like, they've nailed this. Like, this is, like, you can tell it's created by the people that, like, love the original, and people that are involved with the original. It's like spot on. The little kind of there's just so many little moments in there that are just absolute joy for a fan of the original. But going back to I mean, your list of films and credits that you've done, writing, directing, producing, do you have a particular favorite, or do you like to kind of have a mixture of the three?
Well, again, I can't say I'm really a producer in the traditional sense. Like, there are things that I have thought of and created, and then became a producer of because of my interest and passion about a particular project or idea. But I'm not a producer like who is like, it's their bread and butter is earning a living through, like, generating ideas and projects, and then putting all the elements together, including the writer and director and the financing and the talent. So I can't say that I'm really a producer in that sense. So I don't do that much of it unless it's a project that I just happen to have thought of or run across and inspired by to do that. I like both writing and directing. They're different things. Writing. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say I love writing. It's horrible. It's horrible. It's incredibly difficult, and creates an enormous amount of stress in my life. Yeah, but I mean, there's very little else I could do as a skill set. So at a very young age, so that's what I ended up doing. And one is very isolating, writing, and the other is very social, directing. And so they have different, they certainly satisfy different parts of my personality, like being in a collaborative environment, shooting, executing, story and film is an amazing thing to be doing, and you get to meet and work with brilliant people. And so when you're in that environment, there's just nothing better. And then writing, you're home alone, wondering why you chose to be a writer. So that's really,
it's true. Actually, I've not really thought of that before. They are so different in terms of, like, being in a dark room on your own typing, to being on set surrounded by everyone asking you questions because you're kind of the guy that everyone asks questions to. That is it's very, very different. And I mean, we've got to wrap up now, and this has been great. Thank you so much. It's been really interesting. I want to ask, if I may, do you have a moment? It can be on set, or at some point in your career. Do you have a anecdote or a story that you can refer to? Perhaps a very embarrassing or humiliating moment that you would share with us.
A humiliating moment.
Doesn't
Awesome.
have
That
to be
would
humiliating, but
live in your podcast forever. Let's see.
yeah, something that's a PG-13, perhaps.
Yeah, well, I only have those, sadly. Well, okay, so when I was doing, the first movie I made as a writer and producer was Grosse Point Blank, that I
Not a
made.
bad first attempt there.
I was very fortunate and very lucky. And I had the kind of massively overconfidence of youth, right? Like I had a totally undeserved and unjustified inflated sense of self. And we were casting the villain of Grosse Point Blank, and there were all these, like we wanted Alec Baldwin, or we wanted, someone else. We had all these people, and Dan Aykroyd's name came up. And I was, I was being very kind of pretentious, like, oh, well, he was great in Blues Brothers and Trading Places and Saturday Night Live. And he's basically one of the most brilliant, comedic actors of his generation, in any generation. But, his last couple of movies weren't so great. And maybe it's over for him, and I was kind of like not for Dan Aykroyd. And I'm not actually sure who engineered the meeting. But someone was like, oh, well, Dan wants to meet you. And I'm just the writer also. I'm not the director. I'm not the studio. And I felt like I was being engineered, to meet Dan Aykroyd. So it was embarrassing. I'm like, wait, so I have to meet Dan Aykroyd now? And so I was like, oh, so they're going to make me pass on Dan Aykroyd or something like that. So I was like nervous, and I didn't know what was happening, that I was suddenly in a room with Dan Aykroyd, who's essentially auditioning for the job. He didn't, read the lines, but he's meeting with me because he wants to do this part. And his willingness to do that was also just so surreal. And so he comes and he sits down and immediately starts pitching me why he would be perfect for the role. And I realized in that moment that I'm an asshole, right? That I'm a young idiot who doesn't know anything. And what I learned in that moment was that if you're passionate about something, then you should always be humble. Like, you should never ever believe that you are deserving of anything, and you should always just pitch your passion and inspiration. And I learned that because he was so unabashedly, he didn't care who I was. He wanted to pitch, and all of his ideas were brilliant. Like, he wanted to wear that kind of like Mao coat, that collarless blue coat. He starts pitching me how he wanted this kind of vaguely communist like outfit uniform, and then he starts pitching me that he doesn't want to ever reload, so he has this idea of having like a collection of 22 caliber revolvers that he just throws away, and then he takes more out. So he all these kind of brilliant ideas, and he talked about his kind of like Cold Warrior background because of his generation, and how he comes out of the kind of Cold War CIA world, and Johnny would be the next generation of that. And I was just blown away. And I realized that, I'm a terrible person, right? And that he's a genius. And it was a great lesson in, never judging anyone everyone is just, all artists are ruled by their passion. We all want to work and do things that, that make us happy and that we're proud of. And some of those things will end up being things we're not proud of. And some of those things, will be things that, we will deeply proud of for our, the length of our lives. And so that was I'm so happy I got that early lesson from Mr. Aykroyd, because I've held it ever since. Like, I don't judge anyone by what they've done. Frankly, I want to know what they're interested in doing now. I'm interested in, and same for me. I don't wish to be judged. I want to be given the opportunity to pitch the things that I'm passionate about, and have the opportunity to pursue those creative endeavors. And so but it was massively humiliating. Like, I was like, they put the punk kid in a room with the great Dan Aykroyd to teach him that he was, to explicitly teach him that he was being a dick. And so, yes, that's my humiliating moment, and life lesson that I gratefully got early in my career.
And I think that is a beautiful way to finish on. Thank you so much, Steve. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, man. It's been a real pleasure meeting you. I look forward to seeing your work as well, my man.
Thank you.
I have not seen it yet. If there's something here, I'll ask you, if there's something that you are proud of that you'd want me to watch, what would it be?
Oh, I have to go for, I did a film called Northern Soul, which is a very British low budget film. And against all odds, that it was a first time writer, first time director. It was my first lead in a role in a film. And we were all up in the north of England filming this thing in February, freezing cold in Liverpool and Bolton. And the film took 2.5 years to come out, and we all put our hearts and souls into it. But the film eventually came out and it got nominated for a BAFTA and became this, in England anyway, became this film that people now use as a case study, as an example of how to sort of make something from nothing. So for me, like, that film will always be very close to my heart. So Northern Soul, if you do get a chance to watch it, I think it's a good one.
It's similar. It shares a similarity to The Wheel in that respect. That's cool. Yeah, that's great. Well, I will watch it and then I'll reach out to you after.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. That's wicked. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
awesome, man. Well, Steve, thank you again so much.
No, it's my pleasure, and I thanks for your interest, in me and in this movie. That's really, really cool of you.
I really enjoyed the film, man, as well. I thought it was wicked, and it wasn't something, as you said before, like, it's not the kind of thing you've done before, and I didn't know what to expect, but it was a real pleasant surprise, and I was just really glad to get to see it. So I wish you all the best with it, man.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. It's great to meet you.
Thank you to our guest, Steve. And thank you to 42 West for making this episode possible. His latest movie, The Wheel, is out now. Support us on Patreon for early access to episodes, and follow us on TikTok. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. If you have time, write a review. It all makes a huge difference. Thank you.
It's a life and film, and you better come back next month to a life and film.